I'm sure, like you, nothing I like to do more on a Monday than peruse Gab's musings, and something certainly stood out to me as we welcome in the man himself, plus Mark Ogden. Look at this, two senior writers side by side. What a moment. To talk about 5 substitutes, Gab, this is something that could be introduced when football returns, and you love it.
Well, love it, I think, is a bit of a stretch. It's something I would like to see. I mean, they've already introduced the possibility at UEFA level in the under-21s and I think under-19s as well. It's something that clubs have asked for. It's been talked about when the Premier League returns. It's been talked about when Serie A returns. Simply because, if they are going to have to play so many games in such a short stretch, you want to avoid injury. You want to limit minutes on the pitch. One of the key things here is that the 5 substitutions, it's not like, it would be those summer friendlies where you send out another substitute every minute. You would use those 5 substitutions. You can only use them 3 times a game. So you would see more double substitutions and things like that so as not to interrupt the flow. But I think the benefits in terms of fatigue, in terms of squad rotation, in terms of limiting minutes, and of course limiting injuries, I think it's a positive. I don't think there's any real reason why 3 is just an arbitrary number, frankly.
Mark, are you a fan of this?
Not really, no. I just think it's open to abuse. And I think that, as it stands right now, it is abuse. You get managers that will pick 2 or 3 subs in injury time to just run down the clock. What I'd say no more substitutions after 85 minutes so that you can't waste time as much as you do in the final minutes. And yeah, I understand the injury situation, but, players nowadays are so super fit. The tiredness thing doesn't come into it because fatigue now, players can run for 120 minutes. We've seen this in World Cups and European Championships where extra time doesn't separate the teams. Why do they need another advantage? For me, it just seems like an excuse for managers to give the squad players of the game just to get them off the back. So rather than have 3 subs a day, have 5, and then in that way they can keep everybody happy, keep the squad happy. Just encourage his team to have bigger squads.
Well, first of all, I don't say I would be any more open to abuse. It's not like you can interrupt the game any more times than you do now. You've got 5 substitutions, but you can only make substitutions 3 times in the course of a match. So I think that argument doesn't really apply here. I think sending on players who are fitter and hungrier, especially in situations where games are already decided, I think it would certainly make the game, liven the game up and make it more entertaining. But I think overall, it's a question of percentages, right? We see people suffer very serious injuries, whether it's Achilles or cruciates. It's simple math. If you can reduce somebody's minutes over the course of a season by 10%, you're also reducing the likelihood of injury by 10%. And, this adds up over time.
Mark, do you agree this could liven things up, bringing on fresh legs?
No, I just think it would make it more stale. I just think mistakes happen when players are tired. When fatigue creeps in mentally and physically. And I think the last 10, 15 minutes of games when most goals are scored because players are getting tired. If you kind of negate that by putting more fresh legs on, those late goals and those mistakes are going to be reduced. And then games are going to become more kind of stale affairs. I'd more than happily see a cut-off point of 80 minutes, 85 minutes, no more subs, and then let's see what happens. Let fatigue kick in because how you manage fatigue is all part of the game. If players are fitter than their opponents, then great. But if you keep adding subs and fresh legs, nobody's going to get tired.
Gab, Mark's got a point, hasn't he? The fatigue does lead to mistakes, but it leads to goals, which is what we all want to see.
Well, look, if we just want to see lots of mistakes and lots of goals, then we can time travel back and go watch the non-league football from the 1970s. Isn't that a dawdle? A whole bunch of mistakes. I don't. I want to see teams that play well. I want to see people who are fit and well rested and up for it. And I think that's what most people want to see. That's why players train so they can be fit. If we don't see mistakes, let's not have players train. Let's lock them in pubs all day, have them eat pizza all day, and then chuck them out on the pitch, and there'll be lots of mistakes, and we'll all have a lot of fun. I think the key thing here, as I said, this limiting time on the pitch, especially now when there's so much travel, when players have to play so many games, when they are so stretched, that even as sports science has improved and made people fitter in terms of the recuperation, time off the pitch, when you've got a niggly injury and you really should come off, I think all of this stuff matters. Simply, if you can reduce the minutes on the pitch, you reduce by that same percentage the likelihood that a player is going to get injured. I don't think this is going to be some sort of, sea change in football, but it's something that clubs have asked for, and it's one of those things that I just don't see the reasonable argument against it other than bringing on fresh legs. And by the way, with fresh legs, presumably you're bringing on worse players. So there's a trade-off there. So we might still get to see those mistakes that Mark loves so much.
Well, yeah, I think the thing about injuries as well, that it's not a fact that injuries always occur late in games. You see a lot of times in the first 20 minutes of games when players haven't warmed up properly. Injuries happen in the first half of game, the opening minutes of games, because the warm-up is a key part of the game. So it isn't just all about fatigue related, it's preparation related. And I think you can't iron out every flaw in the game. And I do think that if it's survival of the fittest players will last longer than their opponents, which is why they stand above everybody else. So if you're fitter than your opponent in the last 10 minutes, you win the game. It's not about mistakes. It's about fitter athletes, better athletes beating their opponents. So I just think with football nowadays, you can find so many elements. I agree it's all about improvement, but at some point you have to accept that it's a physical challenge as well as anything else. So forget the subs in the last 5 or 10 minutes and let players play for the 90 minutes or play to the test of their endurance.
Gab, will this not just benefit the bigger teams? Like we talk about Manchester City and the quality of their bench. They're going to benefit from this more than, say, someone like a Sheffield United, surely.
Will they? But Sheffield United can bring on fitter players. I mean, look, these are silly arguments. The reality is, statistically, more injuries happen later in games. There's not an argument there. I agree. You can get injured rolling out of bed in the morning. But I think the point is, people in sports science, people in football clubs are asking for this. And I think it's something that should be considered. And I think it's something that is a positive. I appreciate, the gladiatorial side of survival of the fittest and stuff like that. If we had games lasting 5 hours, we could see who's really fit out there. And I think Mark would have fit in really, really well in ancient Rome, in the Roman Colosseum, where it was all gladiatorial. I like to see players who are fit and whose bodies allow them to do the things that technically and skillfully they can do.
Just going back to my point, which you kind of ignored, Gab, City are going to benefit from this more than surely any other club, certainly when you take a look at their bench in the Premier League compared to others.
But you're arguing. Let's think about what you're arguing logically. You're arguing that the drop-off from City starters to City's bench is less than the drop-off from Sheffield United starters, for example, and Sheffield United's bench. And in fact, if you look at the data, you notice that it really isn't the case, that most teams in the Premier League certainly, but I think in most other leagues, the drop-off from the starters to the bench, when we're talking about starters, say, number 7 through 11, to the guys on the bench isn't that great, which is why a lot of teams towards the middle or the bottom of the table use so many players over the course of a season. They don't just stick to the core players, even though by your logic they should, because they play fewer games and because those guys are that much better. So, yeah, City have a lot of great players on the bench, but they have a lot of great players in the starting lineup too. But the drop-off between the two, I think, is frankly negligible.
I'm going to give Mark Ogden the last word on that, then, after that patronising tone.
Well, I think, like I say, Dan, that if you're Man City, you have a bench that may be worth £200 million in one game, as opposed to Sheffield United's may be worth £50 million. So the quality of players on City's bench would outweigh the quality of those on the Sheffield United bench. So I'd imagine that if they're taking off Alexander Zinchenko at left back and putting on Benjamin Mendy, that is a pretty decent exchange. There's no real drop-off in quality there. I think Sheffield United, as well as they've done this season, I think it'd be more difficult for them to replace a starting player with a player from the bench of equal quality. So the big teams would, again, be favoured by having more substitutes because they've got a deeper squad with more expensive, high-quality players than their lower league, their lesser opponents in the lower half of the Premier League. So, again, it favours the big clubs, and I thought we're kind of trying to avoid giving all the advantages to the big teams.
You think the drop-off between Oliver McBurney and Lys Mousset
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. For more from Gab, you can check out the Gab and Jules podcast, which is available to download now.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.